time with thank you so much for taking a minute out. And I want to start our conversation with surviving the last 3.5 years, getting through the pandemic. How did you do that, and how did it change you?
Okay. It is a milestone for us because sometimes I would make this joke, somebody would forget to put their mask on, and I'd say, "What is it? Your first pandemic?" And yeah, it was for most of us, right?
Yeah.
And so it marked a big moment for people, and I think that for me, because I'm a philosopher, it was not so weird in some ways, in that am very used to being with my own experience and not having to occupy myself. We don't realize the degree to which our daily life is covering over all these existential questions. And this is not some abstract, crazy stuff. This is, why the heck am I here?
Yeah.
What's the meaning of life? Why can't we get along? Why do we have all this political discord? This is the most concrete, basic stuff. And much of our life, including our arguments about politics, just really covers over the fact that we don't understand what to do. We don't really know how to live. We don't know what we are. We don't know what death is, how we're going to face it, what it means, what happens after. So these big questions, they remain unanswered for us. And so what we saw with the pandemic was just so many interesting things. People having to be by themselves for a while, people stopping work, not knowing how to navigate the world. Then we had this incredible lesson about how our economic system is crazy, because when we funnel a lot of money, when we had the banking collapse, and we funneled a lot of money to people who have a lot of money, corporations, the very, very top, we're talking way beyond what most of us have, the economy recovered. In the pandemic, when money was funneled to everyday people, we started to have all these problems. And it really also revealed that there are deep issues in the society. So all kinds of things came out. For me, it was just really amazing to see all of that, to see the symptoms got flared up.
Yeah.
People were hating each other because of masks and not masks, and vaccines and not vaccines. All the skepticism that we've got built in about science and how do we know ourselves, how do we know the world, all of this came out. But as far as my own survival, it was not much different. I do
Yeah.
a lot of work online anyway. I do prefer to work with people in person, but I do lots of work online, so that didn't shift too much. As I said, I'm used to spending a lot of time with my own experience, so that didn't change. And a lot of my work is already from home in that sense. I did miss being with people and working with people directly, because it's very powerful to do that. Okay, that's the general answer. I don't know. Maybe we can go from there.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed exactly what I was looking for with that. So I'd like to get more specifically into what you do. So if I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids
Yes.
looked up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you answer that child?
Uh-huh. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I would say, uh, talking to children about philosophy is always interesting, because kids are inherently, they understand that we're philosophical beings. They are little philosophical beings asking these questions about
Uh-huh.
what we know. And so I would explain to them that philosophy means love wisdom. Now, does anybody here have something that they love? Do you love your parents? Do you love your puppy? Do you love nachos? Whatever you love, you want to understand how to take good care of it. If you love your puppy, you want to know how to take good care of your puppy. If you love your parents, you want to know how to take good care of them. If you love nachos, you know how to make it. How much cheese is the right amount, and what's the best salsa, and how do you put it in the oven? We want to know all those things. And love wisdom, or philosophy, just means that we love things and we want to take care of them. And so we need wisdom. We need real understanding. We can't have love in our world without understanding, and we can't have understanding without love. We won't understand things that we hate. We'll dismiss them. And philosophy also means how we do things. So do you have a way that you always get ready for bed? Is there a way that you do it? You brush your teeth. You have these things that you do that seems like the right way to do it. And you have to trust your parents, because they know if you don't brush your teeth, your teeth will fall out. You'll get cavities. And so philosophy also just means how we do things, and we want to do things in a way that seems to really work,
Yeah.
not in a way that doesn't work and causes problems, but in a way that works. And there are people called philosophers who focus deeply, deeply, deeply on how reality works, how our minds work, how our bodies work in a holistic way, not the way a doctor thinks about the body, but in a very holistic way. How do people get along? Why is it that you can get along with some people and other people you don't? Well, philosophers look at that very deeply, and they help us to live in accord with what we love and the wisdom we need to take care of it. And that's why you would go to talk to a philosopher. You might say, I really love my friend, but we're having a difficult time and I don't know what to do. Or I love my parents, but sometimes I don't know how to understand what they're doing. You know, they'll get mad and I don't understand it, or I don't know why I did the wrong thing. I thought I knew better. And how can you help me? And that's what the philosopher might do. So those are some ways to approach it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Oh yeah, there wasn't the word philosophy in my house.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that there was such a thing. And that's part of why the culture is the way it is. You can't maintain the level of dysfunction that we all can recognize. It doesn't matter where you are politically. We recognize there's all this dysfunction in the culture. You can't maintain that without a dysfunctional education system. That means that kids will go, you can go to 18 years of age and never hear the word philosophy in your education. So that wasn't spoken in my house. I thought that for a while, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut. And I was really interested in science. And Nikola Tesla was my hero. And so I built a little electric motor out of a shoebox. You know, I made all the parts of it, and I built little model rockets and launched them. And I was just fascinated with science and space. And so I thought I might become an astronaut or an electrical engineer, inventor, genius. And so when I went into philosophy, I went into philosophy of science initially, because in our culture, even if we hate science or we have all these issues where we yell about the scientists, we can't escape the fact that it's cogent,
Yeah.
and that scientific information has a cogency that we can't really argue with. And so we might try to argue, but really that means we have to keep away from the evidence usually.
Yeah.
And so science has a lot of problems. That's what I discovered as a philosopher of science. And I realized that really it was more important to go deeper to the level of ethics and really understanding on the basis of wisdom. Because philosophy of science itself then still takes science to be the gold standard for how we know things. But the ancient sages didn't have contemporary science, and they were wise. And our contemporary scientists know a lot, but they don't often seem very wise. In fact, I don't know too many who seem really wise. And so I became much more interested in the old way, philosophy as therapia, which means therapy for the soul. How do we become truly excellent human beings? That's what philosophy has always been. And that would be another way to talk about it, even to third graders, is if you want to be really good at something and really good as a person, philosophy is about how we achieve true excellence and success and true happiness and peace of mind. So that's another important way to talk about philosophy. Okay, so that's some general things.
So let me ask you this, in these modern times that we're living in right now, there has to be a fatal flaw that everybody comes to, that when they come to you, there's something that just stands out because we're so close to it, we don't see it. As I heard the other day, someone said, when you're inside the peanut butter jar, you don't see the label on the outside. But you have the fortunate um, vision to see that, being somebody that's wise and that's helping others. What do you see as one of the top things that people have a problem with that immediately needs to be addressed?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it, because it resonates with something I often say, which is that we keep putting the wrong label. Actually, it's not only that we don't see the label, it's that we think we do, and we put the label on, we say, that's the problem. So wokeism, we stick that on there.
Yeah.
Patriarchy, we stick that on there. And we have all these different names, racism, this, whatever it is, anti-Semitism. And those are all misleading labels. There's one label, ignorance. Human beings are not our enemy. The only enemy is ignorance. And whenever somebody comes to me, it doesn't matter what label they've got on it, somewhere in there, they're suffering because of ignorance. That's very difficult to see because the ignorance is so intimate. It's not, there's a kind of ignorance where I could say, look, I don't know what color socks you're wearing, or even if you're wearing socks. That's not the ignorance that the wisdom traditions are talking about.
Yeah.
That is just, I don't know it. ignorance from the standpoint of the wisdom traditions is that I actively misknow reality.
Yeah.
I actively know that you are a dangerous immigrant who's come here to murder people. I don't know anything about you, is the fact. But I actively misknow the situation and claim that as knowledge. And we do this with our own experience, our own psyche. We don't know what our mind is. We don't know how it works. Not really. From childhood on, we're told, pay attention. There too, I could say to the third grader, did your teacher ever say pay attention? Did they ever explain what attention is and how you stabilize your mind? No. And so we don't know how we work. It's like as if you saw somebody with a smartphone, and they were standing there with the smartphone with a hammer, and they were whacking at it. And you said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm trying to use this. Somebody told me it's a phone." He said, "That's not how you use it. You can't hit it with a hammer and think that that's going to work." And that's how we are with our own mind, our own body, and our own world. We're kind of whacking it, and that's just not how it works. And the wisdom traditions teach us, how do we use this body and mind of ours, and how do we use this world? So that's another way to say it, is that we're just misusing everything.
Yeah. So, you're in a profession that's not, from what I understand, is as voluminous as other things out there that help people get to a better place, that imparts wisdom and gets them to a happier place. What is it that motivates you every day to do this work, to help people, to delve further into it? Because from my perspective, philosophy always gives me a lot of comfort. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you get to the end of philosophy, it's okay to still ask why. All right? Because that's what we're doing this whole time. So um you're in a profession that is inherently benevolent, but you still hang on to why. You're finding concretes, but not the concrete. How does that work for you?
Yeah. So this is, you could say, I would say, I sometimes tell people what I do doesn't exist because I am a consulting philosopher. The only philosophers we have in the culture now are in the academy. And Thoreau, when he was on Walden Pond, he wrote in his book there, you can read it, he said there are nowadays professors of philosophy, but not philosophers. And I don't mean any insult to my colleagues, my former colleagues when I was in the university, but there's a way in which he's largely right. And so what happens for most people, their exposure to philosophy is this intellectual, abstract, academic, and they don't have your experience, which is, oh no, it's actually really comforting. And there's real guidance here that can heal us and strengthen us and help us live well with each other and with this world and live in attunement with what we most value. And if you're religious, your religion has a whole philosophy for how you're supposed to be a good Christian, a good Muslim, a good Jew, whatever it might be. And so we need it. It's the thing we can't escape. So it's weird that you will almost never meet somebody who's a consulting philosopher and looks at philosophy as a way of life and as therapy for our soul and for our culture. Because the fact is that you and I can go through our lives and we don't have to become a plumber. We don't have to become a quantum physicist. We don't have to become a biologist, but we cannot avoid being a philosopher, and neither can those other people. The biologist has a philosophy of biology, a philosophy of science that guides them. Even the plumber, they have a way they think is the right way to do their job, the way they think is the right way to be a parent. The wisdom traditions then are just about saying, okay, yes, but you don't try to reinvent the wheel. Oh, I know what's the right way to live life. You don't. You got dropped in here like everybody else, and this is like a big mass of confusion. It's very complicated. Well, not complicated, but complex.
Yeah.
It's very sophisticated. There's wisdom here, but you're not in attunement with it. So let us teach you how to do that. So what keeps me going is that I know that the wisdom traditions are the greatest untapped cultural resource we have.
Yeah.
They are the greatest untapped cultural resource we have. They really can heal. They can help people in mind and body and world. And I see that every day. And it's always been this way. It's not like this was a brand new thing. And it's not like it's one of those things, oh, it's lost tablets of Osiris. No, these things are available. We need help. You can't just pick up Plato and say, oh, well, now I'm a better person. You need guidance. So I think what keeps me going are those things, this recognition that this is an incredible storehouse, a treasure that we all have. It's all part of our inheritance as human beings. Nobody's really working with it in a very good way. And there's a common ground where I see that I can help people and I can help them no matter who they are. Atheists are comfortable talking to me. Fundamentalist Christians are comfortable talking to me because we're just talking about this common ground of wisdom, love, and beauty that all these traditions share.
And that's the beauty, I think, of it, is that you're a conduit of bringing all of those different kinds of people into the room. Because when you're talking about spirituality and theology, that tends to be compartmentalized. It's not that they won't let them in, but I don't know that people feel comfortable coming in there. But there's something about the whole idea of philosophy that is a wide open door, because we all have to gain that wisdom. We all need that mileage. We all need that insight to understand why we're on this planet and what we're here to do. And with that said, when did you figure that out? When did you figure out in your life, this is what I'm supposed to do?
When I took the first philosophy course, I took a philosophy course just kind of, I had this feeling I wanted to take a course in philosophy, and I had a hard time getting in because the introductory courses fill up quickly because they still are at many universities what are called general education requirements. So everybody has to take an intro to philosophy. And so I couldn't get in. And then I thought, well, I'll just, I was a kind of precocious student. So I thought I'll just take an upper division course. And but you have to get permission. They're easier to get into, but the instructor has to let you in. So the first one I went to was an aesthetics course. And that first day in class, as I sat there and I looked at the syllabus, it was a very demanding course. You had to do a lot of writing and thinking, which is typical of philosophy. I mean, I've taken courses in lots of departments, and consistently, I think the hardest readings are in philosophy, and a lot of people agree.
Yeah.
And they showed the film by Salvador Dali called The Andalusian Dog. And this is a crazy surrealist film. You can watch it on YouTube, anybody listening. It's worth watching, although it's surreal. Okay, so this is not like casual viewing. And when I saw that, because I didn't really have training in the arts either, that's another thing the culture kind of protects us from is, oh, not too much art and definitely not too much nature. We don't want you falling in love with nature. Um, when I watched that film, I had no idea how I could speak intelligently about a work of art like that. And I panicked. And the teacher said, well, I can let you in. And I said, well, okay, but let me think about it. And then I think later that day, I just ran to an ethics course that was running. And that I felt, okay, I can do this. And by the end of that, before it was even done, like within a few weeks, I realized, oh, I'm changing my life. I'm majoring in this. This is what I'm here to do. And then it just continued from there. Now, the difficulty is because of this difference between academic philosophy and philosophy as it appears in the ancient roots even of our own culture, because our culture is not just a Christian culture, it's not just an Abrahamic culture. It is a Greek informed culture, heavily informed by Greek philosophy. But what happens is when you are in an academic program, even as an undergraduate, you quickly find out that what your soul feels as, oh my gosh, I'm going to study wisdom, love, and beauty. That's not really what's going on. And so you have to deal with that. It's kind of like when I got a PhD in philosophy, I looked at it as getting a union card.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with what I was going to do, like whatever films I was going to be like, here's my SAG card. I can go star in action films or I can do these indies, right? But that's what it was. It's just, this is my union card. I've been trained. I have some kind of legitimizing feature here, right? Because you have to go through a lot to get a PhD. And nevertheless, the way I do philosophy is very different from the way most of my colleagues do it. But that's how it started. It just took a course. You read these philosophers, and if you're reading them that way, where you're taking it as, this is about my life and how I live and how I can be a better person, okay, it draws you in.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm a student of philosophy, I guess. I mean, yes, I'm a philosopher, but I am a student of of these traditions, and those traditions are asking us to understand what we are. And there's a way in which, when you practice for long enough, you begin to actually understand at least some of what they're getting at, where you say, oh my goodness. I sometimes say the practice of philosophy, however long I've practiced, and now it's been quite a few decades, I'll say, like, what has it been now? Maybe 25 years or more. I'll say, well, the first 24 years are the hardest. But luckily, I'll say I've recently started practicing, really practicing, because as you go on, you say, what was I doing before? And you have insights that shift you so significantly that when you then go back and look at the teachings, they make a totally different kind of sense. And you think, oh, this is what this means.
Yeah.
In our own life, we experience this. When you're 5 and you have your first crush and you say, oh, I love so and so, that's not going to be the same as when you're 25 and you meet the person that you end up marrying and you say, I love this person. And then when you have a child and you say, oh my gosh, I love this child, the meaning of that has shifted for you. Even your own understanding of your parents, you suddenly go, oh my God, my parents, I just see them totally differently now that I have a kid.
Yeah.
And so our whole life is like that. I can say that my family, from a family perspective, the worst Christmas ever in the history of my family was that when I went to college as this bright young kid who was going to go become a lawyer and maybe a politician. And, you know, my parents didn't have college degrees. This was like a big deal. And then I come back and say, I'm majoring in philosophy. The entire family had a meltdown. I mean, it was not just my mother, but she had 4 sisters. So there are 5 daughters. My grandfather was a coal miner. Everybody from top down had a meltdown. But then when my mother died and her sisters were there at the bedside, philosophy is training for death. It's in part what's important. In order to live well, you have to know how to live well. You have to know how to die well too.
Yeah.
And so Plato said that very clearly. Philosophy is training for death. And I really there too was, oh, I really see how this is important, because it's not just my death, but to be there for my mother's death. And my aunts said to me, okay, well now, you know, we were skeptical about this philosophy stuff, but apparently it really does make a difference.
Yeah.
And they were really grateful that I was there for their sister, who was like a mother to most of them because it was a somewhat dysfunctional family. My mother was the oldest, and she was really like, some of those kids called her mommy when they were little, and they really, really could see. So I think maybe they get it too, you know, and that's what matters. People have to, it's not just what we think. It's not our ego, but other people have to feel differently. If we practice philosophy, really practice our life, other people notice it. Other beings notice it. Dogs, horses. So there's
Absolutely.
always a feedback.
Yeah, for sure there is. So Nikos, if anyone wants to hire you, learn more about you, reach out to you, anything about your world, how do they do that?
Okay, well, so you don't have to hire me unless you're really serious. But there are lots of free resources. Go to dangerouswisdom.org. We'll put a link in the show notes here for the place to begin. The place I always begin is learning about compassion and how to practice compassion. It's a skill. It's not something that we just are automatically, it's our birthright, but we have to learn it. Just like you're born able to speak language, but if no one speaks it to you, you ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
So get some free resources there. And then we can put a link to for the podcast. You can learn a lot that way. And then, sure, if you want to contact me, you can, but that's not what's important. Find a place where you can practice your life. It might be a lineage that was from your childhood. Maybe you've rejected Christianity or you think you've been a good Christian. Go deeper and find ways that the wisdom traditions can support your life, because they can make a huge difference. So I just recommend that people engage with them.
Wow, you're such a wise, calming force. I really appreciate you imparting your wisdom and your light today. Thank you for taking a minute out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. It's been delightful talking to you.
Great talking to you. And I want to make sure I pronounce your name right. How do you pronounce it correctly?
Nikos Patedakis. And that's because I'm a first generation American on the other side. So my grandfather was a coal miner here, but my dad is from Crete. He was born there and came here as a little boy. And if you meet somebody with the last name that ends in KIS, very likely they came from Crete.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Man, this
Weird
has been
fact.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. Cool, man. Thank you so much. This has been so illuminating. Best of luck with
Same
everything.
here. It's delightful. Delightful. Thank you for what you do, Joe. I appreciate it.